Jimmy Kimmel thought it would be funny to mock Sylvester Stallone on national television. What he didn't expect was that Stallone would fire back without saying a single word and still leave Kimmel's career wobbling like a bad punchline. This wasn't some petty celebrity feud, it was something much bigger. What started as a canceled talk show appearance quickly turned into a public humiliation that exposed just how fragile late-night television really is. For years, Hollywood has tried to sideline voices that don't play by its rules, but this time it picked the wrong guy. Because Stallone isn't just another actor. He's a symbol of grit, loyalty, and old-school values. And when he gets disrespected, he doesn't need to clap back on Twitter. He lets the silence and the fallout speak for itself. But what really happened behind the scenes? Why did ABC suddenly beg Stallone to return after canceling on him? And why are audiences now saying this might be the moment late-night TV finally lost its grip? Let's break it down. It was supposed to be a big night. Sylvester Stallone had just launched two major projects, Tulsa King, a gritty crime drama with a fresh take on mob life, and The Family Stallone, a rare look into his real life as a father and Hollywood icon. Promotion was in full swing, and fans were excited to see him sit down for a rare late-night appearance on Jimmy Kimmel Live. For Stallone, it wasn't just about plugging a show, it was about reconnecting with longtime fans on a platform that still had mainstream reach. He doesn't do interviews often, especially not on late-night talk shows, so this was a moment audiences were looking forward to. But behind the scenes, something shifted. According to insiders, Kimmel wasn't thrilled about having Stallone on his show, not because of scheduling conflicts or production delays, but because Stallone's personal views didn't exactly align with the kind of commentary Kimmel regularly pushes. Instead of treating it like a professional interview, Kimmel reportedly pushed ABC to pull the plug altogether. Just like that, the appearance was off. There was no public explanation, no scheduling announcement, just silence until the real story started to leak. Kimmel hadn't just canceled Stallone's segment, he turned it into a private message heard loud and clear. If you don't think like us, you don't get the mic. But what Kimmel didn't realize was that canceling Stallone wasn't just another programming decision. It was a trigger, one that would blow up far bigger than anyone at ABC was prepared for. And the fallout was just getting started. Most celebrities would have quietly moved on, but Jimmy Kimmel, he couldn't help himself. Instead of letting the cancellation slide under the radar, Kimmel took it a step further. During a monologue just days after Stallone's appearance was pulled, he launched into a series of offhanded jabs, masking them as jokes, but they didn't land like comedy. They landed like something personal. He poked fun at Stallone's age, his past political donations, even tossed in a smug comment about certain Hollywood fossils still stuck in the 1980s. There was no name mentioned, but fans didn't need one. The target was obvious. The reaction? Instant. Clips of the segment began circulating on social media within hours. And the comments weren't laughing, they were furious. Viewers weren't just upset that Stallone had been disrespected. They were stunned that Kimmel used his platform to punch down at someone who had already been quietly cut from the show. He cancels the guy, then mocks him for not being there, one viewer tweeted. That's not comedy, that's cowardice. And that was just the beginning. The hashtags started trending. Hashtag respect Stallone, hashtag cancel Kimmel. People from both sides of the political aisle were calling it what it was: petty, unnecessary, and a cheap shot from a host who's been losing touch with his audience for years. But the backlash didn't just come from fans. Even critics who had previously praised Kimmel began questioning his motives. One columnist called the moment a new low in late-night hypocrisy. Another said, when you cancel someone for their beliefs and then ridicule them for not showing up, that's not satire. That's a tantrum. Kimmel had made a mistake, and it wasn't going away quietly, because Stallone hadn't even responded yet. And still, it felt like he'd already won. But what came next proved just how deep the damage would go. What started as a few angry tweets quickly turned into a full-blown revolt. Within 24 hours of Kimmel's segment airing, social media lit up like wildfire. Fans who had grown up watching Rocky and Rambo weren't just disappointed, they were outraged. Stallone wasn't just a Hollywood legend. To many, he was a symbol of perseverance, loyalty, and old-school values. And watching him be mocked by a host who hadn't earned even half his respect? That didn't sit right. Posts flooded in from every corner of the internet. Some called Kimmel a Hollywood gatekeeper drunk on his own ego. Others pointed out the irony, mocking someone for being politically independent while claiming to support diversity of thought. It wasn't just keyboard warriors chiming in either. Longtime viewers of Jimmy Kimmel Live began publicly distancing themselves. Clips of the monologue racked up millions of views, but the comment sections weren't laughing. They were tearing Kimmel apart. "This isn't comedy, it's bullying disguised as relevance," one top comment read. And that backlash bled into the mainstream media fast. Entertainment outlets started picking up the story, and the headlines weren't kind. Kimmel takes aim at Stallone and misses completely. When did late-night comedy become a personal grudge match? Stallone silenced, but Kimmel's the one taking the hit. Even some journalists who typically gave Kimmel a pass started asking uncomfortable questions. Why was it okay to cancel a guest based on politics? Why was a man known for uplifting stories and decades of cinematic impact now being targeted by a network host? Meanwhile, other late-night shows, many of which once competed directly with Kimmel, quietly distanced themselves. One producer anonymously told a trade outlet, "We're not touching that." That's a PR minefield. The fallout was happening in real time, and the message was clear. You don't come for Stallone without consequences. But while viewers were turning on Kimmel, executives at ABC were watching something even worse: the numbers. Behind the cameras, ABC was in full-blown panic mode. What was supposed to be just another late-night episode had turned into a public relations nightmare. The Stallone controversy wasn't fading. It was growing. And now it wasn't just viewers criticizing Kimmel. It was advertisers, industry insiders, even some of ABC's own internal staff. The first red flag? Ratings. Jimmy Kimmel Live had already been slipping in viewership over the past few years. But after the Stallone segment aired, the drop was sharp and immediate. Within a week, the show hit a season low. Longtime sponsors started asking questions, and internally, executives began circulating memos labeled "Urgent Viewer Sentiment Decline." They realized too late that this wasn't just about one guest. This was about trust, and Kimmel had just shattered it. So in a desperate attempt to patch the hole, ABC did what most corporations do when backed into a corner. They tried to make it right. Quietly, they reached out to Stallone's team, first with an apology, then with an offer. According to sources close to the situation, ABC proposed a full rebooking, offering Stallone complete creative control over the segment. No scripted jokes, no censorship, no interference. Just Stallone, unfiltered, talking about whatever he wanted. It was a move the network had never offered a guest before. And to sweeten the deal, they dangled potential future collaborations, production opportunities, partnerships, even talks of a docu-series tie-in. Anything to stop the bleeding. But Stallone wasn't interested. His team made it clear. This wasn't about promotion, it wasn't about getting even, and it definitely wasn't about salvaging Kimmel's reputation. The cancellation had already sent a message. The mockery had sealed it. Now, any apology felt like damage control, not respect. And for a man like Stallone, who built his entire career on loyalty and principles, that was a deal-breaker. But the real humiliation for ABC wasn't the rejection. It was what came next. Because Stallone's silence spoke louder than any interview ever could, and the ripple effect across Hollywood was just beginning. For a moment, ABC thought they could fix it. In their eyes, it was just another PR bump, one that could be smoothed over with the right offer and a well-crafted apology. But Stallone didn't respond with outrage. He didn't go on a podcast. He didn't post some angry Instagram rant. He just said no. No to the rebooking, no to the apology, no to the carefully worded promises of total creative freedom. And behind that quiet rejection was a message that couldn't have been clearer. You don't get to cancel me, mock me, then ask for a favor when the backlash hits. For Stallone, this wasn't about revenge. It was about principle. He'd already made peace with the fact that legacy media plays by different rules. But that didn't mean he had to play along. His silence wasn't weakness. It was control. His team, including his agent and longtime manager, didn't mince words either. One insider revealed, the offer felt more like ABC trying to save themselves than a genuine apology. And fans agreed. Across social platforms, support for Stallone hit new highs. People respected that he didn't take the bait, that he didn't cave, that he didn't use the moment to grab headlines. He let the truth speak for itself. "He's too classy to stoop to Kimmel's level," one viral tweet read. "This is how real men handle disrespect, with quiet strength." And that was the part that really stung for ABC and Kimmel, because while they were scrambling to undo the damage, Stallone didn't have to lift a finger. His refusal became the loudest moment of the entire controversy. And just when the network thought it couldn't get worse, it did. Because now other Hollywood names started pulling back too. ABC thought the storm would pass once Stallone declined their offer. What they didn't expect was the domino effect that followed. Word spread fast across the industry. If Sylvester Stallone, a Hollywood legend, could be iced out, mocked on national television, and then invited back only after a full-blown backlash, what did that say about how legacy media really operates behind the scenes? The answer wasn't subtle, and more importantly, it wasn't forgotten. Almost overnight, the fallout began to take shape, not as one dramatic moment, but as a slow, visible unraveling. Kimmel's guest list, once lined with A-listers and up-and-comers eager for late-night exposure, suddenly began thinning out. Some bookings were quietly pulled, others simply stopped responding. A few publicists, speaking off the record, admitted they were reconsidering the value of appearing on a platform where personal beliefs could be turned into punchlines. Even inside ABC, alarm bells were ringing. The network had worked for decades to brand Jimmy Kimmel Live as a flagship property, an accessible, family-friendly show that mixed humor with heart. But now that reputation was under fire. Executives were holding emergency meetings not just to deal with the ratings drop, but to figure out how to salvage the show's credibility. The timing couldn't have been worse. Kimmel's numbers were already slipping before the Stallone incident. Now they were plummeting. Internal analytics showed not just a dip in live viewership, but a steep decline in online engagement, the lifeblood of modern late-night programming. Clips that once racked up millions of views overnight were now struggling to gain traction. Worse, the comment sections weren't full of fans quoting jokes. They were flooded with angry viewers calling for accountability. And the optics? Brutal. While ABC scrambled behind the scenes, rival platforms pounced. Fox News, The Daily Wire, even massive podcasts like Joe Rogan's team began reaching out to guests who had passed on Kimmel's show. The appeal was simple: speak freely, be respected, and reach millions without being used as a political prop. And guess what? It worked. Former Kimmel regulars began appearing elsewhere, on YouTube interviews, on independent news platforms, on shows that didn't come with a catch. Audiences followed. They were hungry for something real, and the idea that a major network like ABC would silence a guest, then mock him, and then beg him to come back, that didn't sit right with anyone. Meanwhile, the internal culture at ABC started to fracture. Some staffers were furious, not just with Kimmel's decision to mock Stallone, but with how the network handled the aftermath. A few believed Kimmel should apologize on air. Others thought ABC needed to publicly address the situation. But the top brass? They stayed quiet, hoping it would all blow over. And in that silence, trust inside the building started to erode. Producers who had once backed Kimmel to the end were now asking hard questions. Is this show still worth protecting? Is it even still profitable? And above all, what's the long-term cost of alienating half the country to score a few political points? The answer became clearer by the day. Advertisers began pulling out of upcoming episodes. Promotional campaigns were quietly canceled. Even Disney, the parent company of ABC, started distancing itself, reportedly reviewing Kimmel's contract with fresh eyes. Industry chatter picked up fast. A few insiders speculated this could be the beginning of the end, not just for Kimmel, but for the entire format of politically charged late-night comedy. Because this time it wasn't just one segment that failed. It was a culture that collapsed under the weight of its own arrogance. And through it all, Stallone remained silent. No interviews, no tweets, no podcast rants, just pure, calculated stillness. And yet somehow he had more control over the narrative than the host with the microphone. His refusal to return wasn't just a personal decision. It became a symbol of everything viewers had been feeling for years: disrespected, dismissed, shut out. Kimmel's attempt to score a laugh had turned into a career-altering mistake. But Stallone's quiet rejection? That became the moment that ripped the curtain down. Because for every viewer that changed the channel that night, there were thousands more who never came back. Not just from Jimmy Kimmel Live, but from the entire idea that legacy media still deserved their trust. And by the time ABC realized what had happened, it was already too late. While Jimmy Kimmel and ABC scrambled to control the damage, Sylvester Stallone was already 3 steps ahead. Because unlike most legacy celebrities still clinging to traditional media, Stallone saw the writing on the wall. And he made his move. He didn't whine, he didn't demand airtime, he didn't launch into a social media campaign. Instead, he went exactly where legacy media fears the most: independent platforms that don't play by Hollywood's outdated rules. And that decision didn't just keep his career alive, it launched it into a new era. His first major appearance was on The Joe Rogan Experience. It wasn't some carefully packaged segment or polished PR spot. It was a real, honest, 2-hour conversation. No network censors, no producers whispering in earpieces. Just Stallone, sharing battle stories from the golden age of film, talking about what it really took to make Rocky, opening up about regret, fatherhood, and discipline, all without pretense. And the numbers? Massive. That single episode became one of Rogan's most watched interviews of the year, pulling in millions of views within days. The comment sections were overflowing with praise, not just for the stories, but for Stallone's character. Audiences weren't watching a celebrity. They were listening to a mentor, a survivor, a man who'd fought for everything he had and didn't need Hollywood's approval to stay relevant. One comment stood out. "I didn't realize how much I missed hearing from real people until Stallone sat down and just talked." The reaction confirmed what the industry didn't want to admit. Audiences are tired of prepackaged stars pretending to be relatable. They're hungry for authenticity, and Stallone gave it to them in full. Then came The Greg Gutfeld Show, another non-traditional platform, another smash hit. Stallone appeared relaxed, direct, and unapologetically himself. He didn't bring a script. He brought perspective. While Gutfeld tossed in his usual wit, Stallone balanced the tone with grounded reflections on success, legacy, and how Hollywood has changed, for better and worse. It was more than a TV segment. It felt like a generational handoff. Stallone wasn't just reminiscing. He was schooling a new wave of creators, actors, and fans who'd never seen a star who didn't beg for attention. He didn't need to. He earned it. From there, the ripple effect took over. Clips from both appearances went viral. Stallone quotes were turned into reels, memes, motivational posts. YouTube channels chopped up the best moments and built millions of views off them. His words, once filtered through late-night editors, were now reaching people directly. No middlemen, no gatekeepers, just message and meaning. And behind it all, Stallone began shifting how he used his own platforms. He became more active on social media, not in a performative way, but with purpose. He shared stories behind old movie scenes, talked about overcoming rejection, showed clips of him training at age 76, not to prove he's still tough, but to remind people that drive doesn't fade with age. Younger audiences started tuning in, not out of nostalgia, but out of respect. They weren't alive when Rocky hit theaters, but they felt inspired watching a man who refused to be boxed in by Hollywood politics. Meanwhile, traditional celebrities kept showing up on late-night shows, reciting talking points, laughing at forced jokes, and pushing projects nobody cared about. Their segments were forgettable. Stallone's moments were unforgettable, and the industry noticed. Other aging icons, once considered past their prime, began reaching out to the same platforms. Not for exposure, but for freedom, because Stallone had proven that relevance doesn't come from a network. It comes from truth, from values, from legacy. While Kimmel's team was busy analyzing ratings and trying to suppress the backlash, Stallone was out there building something far more powerful: connection. He wasn't just surviving the new media landscape, he was leading the way through it. By the time ABC circled back with new offers promising a clean slate and total control, Stallone didn't even flinch. He didn't need their approval. He didn't need their airtime. He already had something better: a loyal, growing audience who trusted him. And in the world of modern entertainment, that's more valuable than any scripted late-night segment ever could be. Because Stallone didn't just sidestep the smear campaign, he rewrote the rules of what a public figure could do in the digital age. He showed the world what happens when you bet on character over clout, substance over strategy, truth over trend. And he reminded everyone watching that you don't need to shout to be heard. You just need to stand your ground and let the rest crumble. What happened between Stallone and Jimmy Kimmel wasn't just personal. It was a moment that peeled back the curtain on a much deeper shift taking place across the entertainment world. For decades, Hollywood controlled the narrative. If you wanted exposure, you played by their rules. If you wanted to stay relevant, you smiled, nodded, and sat on the late-night couch while the host took his shots, made his jokes, and pretended it was all in good fun. But somewhere along the way, the act wore thin. Audiences started waking up. They realized they weren't watching interviews anymore. They were watching performances, pre-approved talking points, predictable political jabs, a carefully crafted illusion designed to sell a version of reality that no longer reflected the world people were actually living in. And then came the breaking point. The moment Stallone was mocked on national television, after being quietly canceled behind the scenes, something changed. Not just because it was Stallone, but because people saw a mirror in him. They saw someone who'd worked his whole life to earn respect, only to be tossed aside by a system that no longer values legacy, only loyalty to the current narrative. That struck a nerve. It wasn't just the disrespect, it was the arrogance of it all. The assumption that the audience would go along with it, that viewers would laugh on cue, that no one would question why a man like Sylvester Stallone, who gave the world iconic stories about grit, resilience, and the American dream, was being reduced to a punchline. But they did question it, loudly. Because the truth is, late-night TV isn't a cultural cornerstone anymore. It's a fading echo of what used to be entertainment. And people are leaving it behind, not in protest, but in indifference. They're not boycotting it. They're just not watching it. Why would they? Why would anyone choose a watered-down, pre-scripted interview when they can watch a 2-hour podcast that actually feels human? Why sit through the same joke formats when independent creators are dropping thoughtful, hilarious, uncensored content every single day? And that's where the shift becomes undeniable. It's not just that legacy media is losing viewers, it's that the new media, platforms like YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, Substack, is gaining something more valuable: trust. Trust that the conversation won't be cut off halfway through. Trust that the guest won't be ambushed. Trust that people will be treated like individuals, not political caricatures. That kind of trust can't be bought, it has to be earned. And Stallone just reminded everyone how rare and powerful it really is. Other public figures are catching on. Zachary Levi's criticism of Hollywood's obsession with political messaging wasn't just a one-off comment, it was a signal. More and more entertainers are starting to pull back from the performative politics. They're realizing that creativity doesn't survive in a culture where every word is policed, every joke dissected, and every disagreement punished. And it's not just actors. Comedians, musicians, filmmakers, even sports figures are opting out of the traditional media circuit. They're going direct to audience, building platforms of their own and cutting out the middlemen who used to control access to the spotlight. Why? Because the rules have changed. It's no longer about being invited onto a network. It's about owning your message, having a voice that isn't filtered, censored, or edited for PR safety. And the audiences? They're not just ready for it. They're demanding it. That's the real story here. Stallone's quiet, principled refusal to return to ABC didn't just embarrass a network. It became a spark, a moment that captured everything people have been feeling but couldn't quite articulate. A turning point that separated those who follow the script from those who write their own. It's not about being left or right. It's not about picking sides. It's about integrity. It's about knowing who you are and refusing to bend just because someone with a microphone wants to score cheap laughs at your expense. And while legacy media still thinks it holds the keys, the truth is, those doors are wide open now. Anyone can step through. Anyone can speak. And the audience? They're not sitting in front of their TVs anymore. They're online, they're engaged, and they know the difference between a performance and the real thing. So when Stallone walked away from Jimmy Kimmel's stage, he didn't lose visibility. He didn't fade into the background. He lit the path forward, and whether Hollywood wants to admit it or not, millions are following. Sylvester Stallone didn't have to raise his voice. He didn't need a viral Twitter thread, a dramatic press tour, or some orchestrated PR stunt. He didn't clap back, cancel anyone, or turn the moment into a personal crusade. He simply declined. No drama, no noise, just a quiet refusal to play along with the game. And in that silence, something powerful happened, something no late-night monologue could manufacture. He exposed the truth, not just about Jimmy Kimmel, not just about ABC, but about an entire system that's been running on fumes for far too long. A system that's confused ridicule with relevance, one that tears people down for sport and expects applause afterward, one that no longer uplifts, entertains, or challenges. Instead, it lectures, divides, and demands obedience. And for what? Ratings? Clicks? Headlines? Stallone walked away from all of it, not because he needed to, not because he was afraid, but because he knew it wasn't worth it. He knew his voice mattered more than any network appearance. He knew his legacy didn't depend on a 10-minute segment with canned laughs and fake smiles. And that shook the industry to its core. Because Stallone didn't just reject an invitation, he rejected the illusion, the lie that you need them more than they need you, the idea that relevance is only possible if you follow the script. He proved that respect isn't given by networks or studios. It's earned by standing your ground even when it's easier to stay quiet. That's what hit people the hardest. That's what stuck with viewers long after the clip ended, because they saw themselves in Stallone. Regular people who've been told to sit down, stay quiet, blend in. People who've been mocked for their beliefs, passed over for being too old, too traditional, or too different. People who've watched their heroes torn down in front of them while the crowd cheered. But Stallone didn't bend. He didn't shrink to fit the moment. He owned it. And in doing so, he reminded people of something they hadn't seen in a long time: authenticity, integrity, backbone. He reminded them what it looks like when someone chooses principle over popularity. And for that brief moment, the noise stopped. Because in a world addicted to outrage, the man who said nothing ended up saying everything. And the timing couldn't have been more symbolic. This is a man who came from nothing, who slept in bus stations, sold his dog to survive, and wrote Rocky when no one believed in him. He bet on himself when the entire industry told him to quit. And not only did he prove them wrong, he inspired generations along the way. So when a guy like Stallone says no thanks to a late-night stage, it's not just a scheduling decision. It's a statement. A statement that maybe the system isn't worth saving, that maybe the stage isn't what it used to be, that maybe the people running the show forgot what made it worth watching in the first place. Jimmy Kimmel will move on. ABC will try to course correct. They'll repackage, rebrand, and replace. But the audience, they've already moved on. They're no longer interested in being talked down to. They want something real. And if that means skipping the networks entirely, so be it. Because people aren't just watching anymore. They're choosing what they watch, who they trust, who they follow. And in that new reality, Hollywood doesn't hold the cards. Creators do, individuals do, viewers do, and Stallone? He's already ahead of the curve. He doesn't need legacy media. He is the legacy. A legacy built not on controversy, but conviction. Not on conformity, but courage. Not on applause, but on respect. So as the dust settles and Kimmel's show limps forward, trying to pretend like nothing happened, Stallone stands tall, unchanged, unbothered, and, as always, unstoppable. Because in the end, the man who played a fighter didn't need to throw a single punch, he just had to walk away. And the world heard it like a thunderclap.